Okay, today we're going to be talking about how do memories and biases work together and how do they affect each other as well. So first we're going to be talking about a memory, and a memory is something that gets encoded into our brain by using our five senses, which is hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, and seeing. We use our five senses to help us encode it into our brain because our senses is what helps us remember it the most, because images and sound is how we remember something the most. The next is going to, after it gets encoded, it goes into the hippocampus and the frontal cortex. And then after it goes into the frontal cortex and hippocampus, it goes into two different categories. It can either go into short-term memory or long-term memory. A short-term memory is just you only remember something for a very short period of time. So this would be a great example of if you're reading an article for class and you had to read it and then write a reflection about it. You would read the article, and then after you write the reflection, you wouldn't really have to remember too much of the article anymore because you've already used the short-term memory to rewrite the reflection. And then the next one is going to be a long-term memories. We have a couple of different long-term memories. One is going to be an explicit memory that is tied to a life experience. An example for this would be if you got into a really bad car accident when you were little, and now you're not the best driver, you get really skittish when you're driving, or you just get really uncomfortable when somebody drives too close to you or they're going too fast. This type of memory is going to be explicit memory because it's tied to a life experience, and it's something that gets recalled as well. The next one is going to be a long-term systematic, is a memory that is common. So one would be that we do have a president, and every person in America knows that president. And then another one would be also that we all live on planet Earth as well. The next one is going to be an implicit long-term memory, and this implicit long-term memory is used mainly when we're little. We could still use it as we older, but one good example of it is when we learn new motor skills when we're little, when we learn how to ride a bike, or when we learn how to run, or when we learn how to skip. We memorize those types of motor skills, and we can recall it without even having to really realize it. We can just recall it super easy. And then also, as we learn more skills in life, we can use those as well and commit them to long term. The next one is going to be after we make the decision whether it's going to be in long-term or short-term memory, then we need to be able to retrieve the memory, and we can retrieve the memory in three different ways. The first one is going to be recalling it, which we can do with ease. So a great example for this one is going to be being able to recall a phone number or eye color or a hair color. It's something just automatic. Next one is going to be recognizing something you've heard or seen. So this is a great example for having an exam or having a test, because we might not know the exact answer, but we can kind of guess based on what we recognize and what we don't. The third one is going to be relearning or jogging your memory and doing something. So let's say you haven't gone roller skating in a while, and you put on your skates and you're kind of wobbly, but after a couple of times you're brand new, and nobody, if they walked in, they wouldn't know you just started roller skating again, and it's only been a couple of years, because you just kind of jog your memory and brain how to do it. The next one, that's all memory, and then we're going to start talking about bias. Bias is a prejudice that a person feels by another group, whether it's positive or negative. Everybody has a bias, and biases do affect most things that we do. Biases can always be in a positive way. It doesn't always have to be negative. In the end, a bias is emotionally based, and also so is a memory. A memory is as well emotionally based. Memory is emotionally based because when we call it, we don't only have to deal with the emotions of the memory, but we also have to deal with the emotions of how we are feeling that day when we recall it. Every time we recall a memory, it gets changed a little bit, and it also will reflect the mood we are in. Biases and memory work together because they are both emotionally based, and if we are biased against something, it will affect our memory more than it should. Let's say you saw a crime go down and it happened, and you're walking down the street and you saw a man rob a girl and take her purse. And then when a cop asks you what happened and you have to recall your memory, you might say, oh, the man pushed her down and he was being really mean and he just ran off with her purse. But in all reality, he really didn't push her, or he really didn't do much physical harm to her other than just taking a purse. And now that memory is affected because you have a bias that men who are mean to girls or who take things from girls will always be physical, or if they're bigger, they can always hurt the women, and so it affects your memory. And then something another example would be from Substance and Spectacle. Let's say you have had a really bad run-in with geese when you were about 5 years old, and then as an adult, when you see a geese on the sidewalk and you just then you cross the street and go to the other sidewalk so you don't have to pass the geese. That is a substance type of bias in memory that's being recalled because the geese makes you uncomfortable, but it's not really bothering anybody else. And a spectacle one would be, let's say you got a shotgun out every time you saw a geese and started shooting at it. Then that affects not only you, but affects everybody else around you, and that is also in the environment. And then it also affects the police officers that have to probably come and arrest you and give you a ticket because you can't just shoot geese. But bias does affect memory because memory is definitely almost based on emotion and has a lot of emotion in it, and so does bias. And so when we think about biases in our memories, it will always affect bias will always come first, and then the memory will come second, because when we remember something, first we have to take in what happened, and then we have to really think about it, and the biases will just affect it, and then the emotion will play in it as well, and then the parts that are missing, our brain just makes up as well.